Welcome to the Nerd Journey Podcast. Our goal is to help you, the technology professional, accelerate your career progression, increase your job satisfaction, and be more effective in your existing role.
We want to bring listeners like you the career advice we wish we'd been given earlier in our careers.
I'm John White, at VJourneyman on Twitter, sharing co-host duties with Nick Cordy at NetworkNerd_.
We're two former IT operations guys who have moved on to pre-sales roles with technology vendors. We have our opinions, but we also like to highlight the journeys of others and see what we can learn from them.
We'd also like to ask for your feedback to make this a conversation, not a one-way broadcast. Email us at nerdjourneypodcast@gmail.com or DM us at nerdjourney on Twitter. So come join us on our nerd journey.
Let's take a trip. Episode 278. As we begin this week, consider the following question. What is your greatest skill? If I asked you that right now, would you know the answer? Or would you need to think about it a little bit? And if you do know the answer, at what point along the way in your experience did you realize it was your greatest skill? Our guest this week was recently asked what her greatest skill was in an interview process, and her answer? Empathy. Marni Coffey is a senior manager for business systems and indirect sourcing and procurement at McKesson, and she is an empathy ninja. In this discussion, Marni's going to share part of her early career in technology, and she'll talk about how to build inclusive teams using that tool of empathy. And I think you'll see how even before she recognized it was her greatest skill, she was demonstrating empathy already. Let's get you to part one of our discussion with Marni Coffey.
Marni Coffey, welcome to the Nerd Journey Podcast.
Thank you. It is great to be here.
Can you tell us a little bit about who you are and what it is that you do today?
Sure. I am currently the senior manager for business systems and indirect sourcing and procurement at McKesson. So McKesson is a healthcare company, pharmaceutical distribution, medical supplies and equipment. Before I started working there, I just never really saw it anywhere. And now that I've been working there, I see it everywhere. Like I see the trucks. I found a pair of the McKesson socks from surgery that I had years ago in my drawer. So they're everywhere.
I remember back when I worked for Wal-Mart Pharmacy, that's who we used to order from every day, based on the prescriptions and the inventory we had. That's where we placed our orders, McKesson.
Yep.
It's definitely the brand of tissues. Every time I go to my physician's office, it's like McKesson brand tissues. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. I don't think I knew that's part of the business.
I was super interested to learn all of the things that they do. I've gotten an opportunity in the short time that I've been there to go and see some of the work that U.S. Oncology is doing. It's fascinating. We get to go in for an all hands where we bring everybody into the office, and occasionally they bring in patients where we've affected their lives, and they give these stories, and there's not a dry eye in the room when it happens. It's just inspiring to work for the company.
So that's not about the tissues. It's about the other parts of the business. But then at that point, everybody uses the tissues.
We use the tissues at that point, yes.
Yes, gotcha. Yeah, it's really cool to be able to work for an organization that touches people so deeply and to be able to understand part of the mission and what you're working towards. That's really amazing that the organization does that. But let me ask you, how did you get into technology in the first place?
So it's kind of crazy because I started out my life thinking I was going to be an English teacher in high school. I was going to be a high school English teacher. And so while I was in school studying to be an English teacher, I went and substituted at a private school and realized teaching was not for me. And definitely not high school, right? So I thought, well, what is it that I love to do? And at the time, I loved building websites. So I decided I wanted to do something like that. While I was still working toward my English degree, I took on some jobs in college to bring a a Chicano literature website into copyright compliance. And then I also took a job on campus that was a fully online job or class. And at the time, that was cutting edge, to have a fully online class. And so I supported that. I went to work in the computer lab, and I changed my major to management information services. So at first I thought, maybe I'll do computer science and I'll be this programmer. There's a lot of math in computer science. And after the third math class, I realized, no, it's just too much. I thought I was smart, but there are a lot of people out there that are really, really brilliant when it comes to that stuff. And I thought, I don't want to be in the job market with these folks. I'm going to go over here to management information services, and I'm going to develop some core talent.
So where did you get the interest in tinkering with web development in the first place? Because you mentioned that came up even as you were studying to be an English teacher.
Yeah. So back then, the internet was still relatively new. People were building websites, and I wanted to build a Wonder Woman fan site. So I built a Wonder Woman site, and I really enjoyed it. At the time, I was also working for the school paper, and I was writing an article, so we did some of our stuff online. But I thought, I have had so much fun writing these little columns and editorials and things like that. I might want to have a website where I do that. I never finished that website, but I built a website and then started just playing around with everything. Theming, just went wild with it and loved it. And then I started learning about databases so that I could have data-driven websites. And I thought, wow, this is where it's at. And I just immediately turned into this giant programming nerd. So I taught myself everything. I did take classes, but what I found was I had an internship and we were trying to solve real-world problems. And so I would come back to my classroom with those real-world problems and say, hey, how would you fix this? And I don't know how I'd fix that. And then later in the semester, they would say, hey, did you ever fix that thing? And I'd be like, yeah, I did. I figured it out. Well, what'd you do? Because we're having that problem now. And so I thought, well, you guys are supposed to be teaching me to do this. Most of what I learned from just digging in and learning. Because by the time you get through your classes, what you learned there is already obsolete. It's moving fast.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. I love the idea of putting your learning to the test, going deep and just banging your head against the wall to see if stuff works. You have to break it a few times to really learn it inside out. And the management information systems or information services, was that where your internship was? Where did the internship play into the story here?
Yeah, I did. So in the business college at OU, they posted the internship, and it was with Logix Communications. And so I took the internship, or I applied for it, and I was chosen, and there was another guy from OU chosen. We're still good friends today. So we went over there and found out that we had to build their intranet. They're a communications company, and we have to build their internal intranet for their employees. So we did that as interns, and they offered us jobs. And so we went to work there, but it was Oklahoma City. They weren't paying a whole lot. It was a lot of fun. We had a lot of freedom to learn. And then I wasn't even there 9 months, and I got offered a consulting gig out in Colorado. And I always wanted to live in Colorado. And it was triple what they were paying me. I'd never consulted, and I thought, oh, that seems so glamorous, being a consultant. So I went out there to be a consultant and started working for a college. It was an online college, and we were building their e-library. We were using a tool at the time, ePrize. And this taught me a lot. It taught me that I may not want to be a consultant. It's not glamorous after all. But it also taught me that a lot of times you get out there in the real world and someone does something inventive with a software that it was never intended to do. And the managers are like, that's amazing. You made it do that. But just because you can do a thing does not mean you should do a thing. And you will end up in a bad way eventually down the road, and your project derails. Nothing's working the way it's supposed to. That's what I learned on my very first consulting. When I moved on from there and moved over I went to work permanently as a printing company, I realized I'm much happier being part of a team in a company, because you don't just build something and go away. And you're like, good luck, hope it works for you. You are invested in it. If you are working there and you build it, you're invested in it. You want to build something that you can support and that is going to be valuable to the company. So I really felt like I learned that when I went to work for the printing company.
So this life of a consultant that you mentioned you didn't like, it's interesting because some people might like it from the perspective of, I get to work with many different companies and I get this exposure to their technology stacks and their problems across industries and areas and things like that. That's interesting. You didn't like the short-term part of it. You wanted to be part of the longevity, not just project basis.
I did. I felt like you got to do a little bit of everything being a consultant. And that, yeah, it's exciting a little bit. But then I thought, I can branch out in a company. You can move along. What you need to do is find a company where you can have a career. Not something where it's just a job and you're only going to get to do that one thing ever. You want something where you're going to be able to grow in your career and try new things. And if you stay long enough in a company, you do get to try all of those things. It's not as fast-paced as a consultant gets to do it. And sometimes people love that travel. Some people love to go and learn all the different technologies. I think I was more attracted to building an actual solution with a process and making it all work. And seeing that happen and being able to partner across that enterprise and that organization with other people and make it work as this big machine was really fascinating to me. That was where it was at for me. That's not where it's going to be at for everyone. But I didn't enjoy consulting. I had a young child at the time. I did not want to leave him a lot. So I liked being at home, but I also just didn't like hopping around to all the different assignments. I wanted to build something and grow it.
So it sounds like there's two things there. One was not having the travel, but then the other was the follow through, like the deep follow through within a single organization, and then branching out those relationships.
Yeah, I had some travel, but not like constantly moving city to city to city. And you can consult and not have to travel like that. In Dallas, there was a lot of opportunity to do that. In Colorado, a lot of opportunity to do that. I just didn't want to do it even then because I just wanted the follow through. I wanted to actually live that solution, know that it would work, and have it go for years and years and years. Of course, it's not going to stay the same. I think in technology, we always think, well, once we get this done, we can sit back and relax. No, it's never done. It is continuous improvement, or it's going to be stale and you're going to be so sorry that you let it just sit there later.
How did being a consultant, and in this case, not really enjoying it, how do you think that affected the way you worked with consultants throughout your career? Because by nature of the beast, probably the average technology professional is going to work with a consultant at some point during their career.
Oh, sure you do. And sometimes it can be harder managing consultants and working with them. You have to get a partnership with them. You have to make them feel invested in what they're building. And so to do that, you really have to include them. You have to make them feel like they are part of that team. They are part of something. They're part of your group. They're not just some consultant that comes in and does the work and goes home. They're part of something. It's almost like a family, right? So they feel like there's part of me in this and I need to make this as good as it can be. And I found that a lot of the consultants I worked with didn't want to leave. Like sometimes they were job hoppers. I had a few that were job hoppers. I say job hoppers. They weren't. They were finishing their assignment and moving on. But they liked that quick pace. But once they got where we were working with me, they wanted to stay. And that's because I recognized early that you had to invest them somehow. And easiest way to do that is to make them feel like they are part of that team. They're part of something big. You value their input. and you all work together to build something really amazing.
I like that.
I think that that's what being a consultant did for me, because the thing that I didn't like was I felt like I wasn't part of it, right? I was just going to build it and I was going to leave and good luck, hope it works. I wanted them to feel like this is yours too. This is part of you and you're part of this team. And it's what I always wanted to feel as a consultant. So I just kind of made an assumption they wanted to feel that too, or that they would like that. And mostly they did. I don't think I've ever had anyone have an adverse reaction to that.
Yeah, the adverse reaction was, I can't believe you made me invested in this when I wanted to be able to emotionally disengage and just leave.
Yeah, it was interesting. People stayed a lot longer than they anticipated and were sorry to leave. They didn't want to leave. The people that moved around the most, that were really excited about doing that, wouldn't buy a house. They lived out of a hotel. They would stay for years.
Wow.
I love considering them part of the team, welcoming them, even if you know they're only going to be there for a short time. Hey, you're part of the team from day one. That makes you feel really good. Not like this outsider, right? I think what you're doing is you're being inclusive somehow in a way that maybe people don't expect. How about that?
Yeah, I think they don't expect it, but I think it gives them something they didn't know they needed.
Bingo.
What were the tactics of inclusion? Maybe that's not the right way to say that, but I don't know what else to say. Like what?
Like how to include them?
Yes.
How to make them feel like part of the team?
Yes.
So you're not just a team at work, right? You're a team all the time. And I learned this when I was going through college and I was a waitress. Like, what was so great about waiting tables is we were a family, right? We hung out outside of work. We knew each other. We knew about each other's lives. Well, it's the same way, now. You include them. You're like, hey, we're going to go have like a happy hour, appetizers, and maybe a couple drinks. You want to come? We're going to have dinner later. You want to come? Hey, we might go see this movie. Would you like to come? And you invite everyone on the team, not just your buddies. You invite everybody. And you find that you have more in common with some of those folks that you've never talked to, that you wouldn't think you had anything in common with when you get them out in a personal setting. Once you've kind of got that relationship, that kind of familiarity with them, it's easier to make them feel like they're part of something at work, because they are part of like a group then. So there are a lot of ways to make things fun for folks. In the pandemic, it was really hard, but you'd get on with Zoom. You'd do like online costume parties or whatever. You'd talk about what you do. I always try to bring a little something personal into my meetings so that people see you as a human being. This is who I am. Tell them something embarrassing that happened, or tell them something fun you did. So if you do that, and you give them the opportunity to share that part of themselves, then I think you end up with a tighter knit team overall. And that's where it starts.
It reminds me of a phrase that I've heard before, which is the freedom to bring your whole self to work.
Yes.
And you seem to be speaking to that. And promoting a workplace where that's encouraged is a skill.
It is.
It's not just check these boxes, right? That's fascinating.
And making them feel comfortable enough to do that is part of it.
Yes.
I was going to say, I would imagine that you have to go into it. If you're going to start doing something like this that you never really have, you're going to try and be more mindful of including others, building the team in that way. I'd imagine you have to go into it expecting that some people probably won't take you up on the offer to go hang out outside of work. Like they're just not going to do that for whatever reason. Maybe they will eventually, but at first they're going to say no, or maybe they'll always say no. Who knows? But I would imagine you have to set your expectations from the beginning so that you don't go, am I doing something wrong? Why are these people saying no?
And they could be saying no for a number of reasons. They want to get home to their families. They have kids they want to see. They've got plans. They've got something to do. I never take it personal if someone says no. I don't think it's because they don't like me or they don't like the team. I just figure maybe they've got something going on. We continue to invite them. We share the experience with them. if we share pictures of something that happened or a group picture that we took, we make sure that they are included in the sharing of that picture, so that they see that we all got together, and we continue to invite them and say, hey, you were missed. We would have loved to have had you there.
You were missed is a powerful message to send to somebody. I really like that.
Yeah. And I mean it too. If somebody doesn't show up, I miss them. I miss that they're not there. I'm like, oh man, they would have really enjoyed this that we're doing. They were talking about this the other day. They would have enjoyed that. Maybe next time they'll really enjoy that. But I wish they could have been here this time.
Is that inclusion? Is that something that you learned somewhere else? Is that something that you had done somewhere else? Or is it just something, that was something that I missed and therefore I'm going to build up on that?
I think it was thinking, hey, what would I want? Surely there are other people out there who would want the same things that I would want. If I were acting this way, if I were this detached, why would I be that way? And what would make me feel more included? I start there. I try to put myself in that person's shoes. I was asked whenever I interviewed for my current position, what is your greatest skill? And I said, empathy. Empathy. Being able to put yourself in the shoes of another person and try to work out why something's happening. Being able to go and talk to them and gather from their, from their feedback, what might be able to make things better, how you could bring them into the fold, how you could get them to be more engaged. That's important. And I've learned over the years how important it is. It's been my go-to strategy. If all else fails, if all my great ideas are failing, I start to think, well, if that was me, why would I feel that way? Why would I not want to go do this? Is there something I'd rather do?
Okay, this begs the question, how did you know the answer to that question? Like, when did you uncover that was your greatest strength? Because I imagine if someone asked me point blank right now, I'm not sure that I could answer that.
I knew it was my greatest strength probably in the last position that I held at PepsiCo, which was the company I was at before this one. I really grew at PepsiCo. I started as a developer, someone that they lock in a closet and throw Snickers in from time to time. That's what I was for a while. And I was kind of surly too. So over time, I started to get more leadership roles. It was more that there was a void. So nobody was doing it. I just did it. No one asked me to do it. I just did it, and no one told me to stop. So I continued to do it. Every time I would work on a project, I would end up as the lead because no one else was really doing it, and they needed one. But I eventually got into the people manager role. Reluctantly, every single big step in my career has been volunteering to do something that no one else wanted to do. Nobody wanted to manage the Macs. And I said, I'll do it. So I did it. And I was able to hone some skills with a smaller group by volunteering to manage the Macs. And then they asked me if I would want to manage the mobile devices, which was like the largest group of devices they had. At a global company, Pepsi's size, it was a huge responsibility and no one wanted to do it. But I said, yeah, I'll do it. It's not that I necessarily wanted to do it either. It's that someone had to do it, and I would do it. In that role, I was just supposed to be another team lead, leading the mobile team there. But they didn't have anyone managing the people. No one was managing them. So I did it. I went to the person who was the official manager of them, and I said, hey, I need to be able to get these folks to share information with me and to give me things. And I'm getting some pushback. And they said, well, that's not my experience with them. And I said, well, but it's because you're the manager. What do you think about maybe letting me be the manager? And they were like, yeah, here. And they went into the tool and transferred them over to me. So I became a people manager. That's how I became a people manager, is they transferred those folks to me. And that way I could start to build the team. Then it just went from there. They saw I could do the job. A lot of companies, they want you to be doing that job before they give you that promotion, right? So that's how I got to be a people manager. I just stepped in where no one was managing the people and started to manage them. and started asking them, hey, this seems like this is painful. This over here seems like it's painful. What else is painful? What can we fix to make your employee experience a little bit better? Because if it's better, then you're going to do better. And then if you're doing better, then our end users, our customers, they're going to do better. It's a domino effect, but it starts, I think, with employee experience. You can't have customer satisfaction without employee experience, I don't think. So I just kind of fell into I won't say I fell into it. I bull rushed it. I went in and just took over and just did it because no one else was doing it. I was like, well, it needs to be done. I'm going to go do it. And then they gave me the title of people manager, and I realized how much I loved it. And in that position, in that people manager position, is where I realized, what my greatest strength is? It's being able to put myself in the shoes of another person. Even if I've never had that experience, to be able to say, well, if I was acting that way, why would I be acting that way? Well, I was in a meeting and this happened. How would I react if that happened to me? Probably the same way. How would I want to be treated? And then I would take that tact. I think if you can find out what people want, what they want for themselves, and there's a way that you can give them that, or at least some of that, that's how you start to begin to build those relationships and those partnerships, and you help each other.
I'd love to ask if this kind of feeds back into something you said earlier, which was nobody was teaching you, so you had to kind of go and figure it out for yourself. If that attitude or that skill kind of helped you in each of these, steps forward that you were taking to act as the lead, to step into a leadership void, to take the people manager role and step into that.
Yeah, I think it is a little bit of that. It's watching other people truly suffer through no leadership, through not having anyone to help them get through things or to clear a path for them. So people leadership for me, if you think you're going to step into it and be the big boss, you don't know what people leadership is, right? They don't work for you. You work for them, right? It is your job to make it possible for them to be successful. Get things out of their way. Make it a little easier for them to be successful, to be able to do their jobs and excel even. I find that when people see that that's how you view it, you're like, I work for you and I want to make sure that I am supporting you in the way that you should be supported so that you get the recognition you so richly deserve. They realize that you're genuine about that, and you do have to be genuine. You can't be faking it. If they realize you're genuine about that, you're authentic, they will do anything for you. I have had people work 24 hours with no break for me just because they knew I was right there next to them and I was going to be standing there with them the whole time. And that they would get the recognition. I wasn't going to take it for myself. I was going to make sure that the people who did that work got that recognition. So being able to see people suffer through not having that, it was the empathy that made me feel like someone needs to do something here. Someone needs to help them. And no one was, so I did.
Wow, so many different directions we could take this. I want to rewind just a little bit. I hate doing it, but I got to go back for a second.
Sure.
You said you started as a developer because you were in Colorado working. Was that a relocation to take this developer job?
It was. So for some personal reasons, I needed to get back to Texas, and my parents were getting older. My brother and sister lived here. We wanted to all be in the same place so that we could all be with our parents in what we thought were their final years. We really thought they're not going to be here another 2 years. So as much as I loved Colorado, I thought, this is important. My father was living with me at the time. He had had a heart attack and a quadruple bypass. So I moved him in with me. And then we were living in Colorado, and my mother started to not do well. So she was having surgeries. Talking to my brother and my sister, we just thought it'd be really good if I could come down here. A couple of other extenuating circumstances, like my mother had bought a house without really selling hers first, and they needed someone to move in and pay that bill. So I just moved down here. I was going to continue working for the company in Colorado, but I interviewed with I think Raytheon, which was a very strange interview. It's an odd place to work, mostly environment, like where it is. But then there's also Pepsi. So I interviewed with both of them and I got offers from both of them. So Raytheon offered me a full-time position. PepsiCo offered me a contract to hire position. On paper, the Raytheon offer looked better, but I kind of need to connect with my company, right? I need to really believe in what they're doing. And it's not that I didn't really believe in what Raytheon was doing. It was more that I didn't relate to it as much as I related to working for Pepsi, because I had been consuming their products, forever. My whole life, I'd been consuming Frito-Lay, Quaker, Tropicana, Pepsi, until they spun off Yum Foods. I was eating at all those fast food restaurants, right? So I knew who they were. I loved their products, and it was just a light, bright atmosphere. I liked the people. I really liked the people that I interviewed with. And I thought, I'm going to go and take that one. So it was more like it was a combination of personal things that brought me back to Texas because I was happy in Colorado. But then getting here, it was like it just kind of flowed. It worked out. I kind of figured it was where I was supposed to be. So I just moved here and took the position as a developer. Previous developer had left, had to deconstruct the system. No one here knew if I was right or not. So I knew I had to be right because they couldn't call me on it. So I did a lot of work to make sure I was right.
You brought out a really important point there, Marni. Not everybody has to necessarily connect with their employer, but you brought out that is a very important thing for many of us. We want to connect with the mission and purpose of the place we go and work, and that can influence our decisions as part of that priority list of how we decide. For you, it was personal, family related, but also the mission of the company. That's great for listeners to understand. And you eventually took a tech lead type role.
I did.
Can you describe for us what the difference is for the technologist who's just an individual contributor and then decides to take on this tech lead role or title? What should they expect if they're going to do that? Is that a separate job? Is it just a title with extra responsibilities? How would you describe it?
It's a leap. So moving from individual contributor to technical lead is the hardest leap I ever took.
The life of a consultant isn't for everyone, and Marni figured out it wasn't for her. She needed to be part of something. Now we can contrast that with someone like a Chris Williams. In episode 229, he talked about going into consulting or working for a consulting firm like Green Pages as a way to avoid boredom. He liked to do something different every 3 to 6 months. And that's okay if that's your preference. In Marni's case, she loves to build things, building solutions, building systems, but she isn't just a builder. She's a builder, a grower, and a maintainer. She likes to see that system be maintained over time, cared for, and continuously improved. So as you think about the type of job you want, if we're talking about providing solutions or building systems, is it just building the system? Or is it building the system, watching it grow, and maintaining it over time? There may be elements of that you like more than others, and that may dictate the type of role you need to pursue as a next step in your career. Marni mentioned early on that she started tinkering with websites and built a Wonder Woman fan site. This idea of tinkering, going deep in different areas, is a common pattern in our guests, and also it's something that can help you determine how different systems worked. Because not only did she tinker with websites and themes and HTML, she started seeing how they could integrate with databases, building a small system from the things she knew already into this web of connected things. You know, we didn't say it in the interview, but I think that this idea of inclusion is really an aspect of team culture, and a lot of the guidance that Marni was providing us in terms of inclusion tactics are how managers or people leaders can create a great culture for their team. Because we found in episode 238 in our discussion with Leanne Elliott that managers are culture keepers. So when you see this sort of culture being emanated from a team, this inclusivity, this kind of thing may only exist on that team. It doesn't guarantee that it exists throughout an entire organization. A lot of that is going to be determined by the people leader, your frontline manager. The kind of inclusion that we're talking about here, we already talked with Marni about how this can apply to consultants and contractors that you work with, people that might be part-time, people that are full-time, maybe even interns. It helps people understand that no matter how much time they spend working with this group or team, they can be a contributor. They can take ownership in whatever work is being done. And as someone who worked for a company that serviced the company that Marni worked for in a particular way, I can honestly say I felt that same kind of inclusion getting to work with her, like I was a member of that team as well. So I want to say kudos to her for making all of us feel like we were part of something, even if it was only for a short time. There's this pattern present in Marni's experience where she sees a gap and she fills it because something needs to be done. There's a need, and she's ready to step up and fulfill that need. I think she is seeking to be the type of manager or people leader that she wishes she would have had at some point, because she talked about seeing teams without a leader, without someone to help. And interestingly enough, even though she was stepping in to fill a gap, it wasn't like people management was something that was on her radar as I must do this. Not at all. She bull rushed it, she stepped into it, and she loved it. She ended up finding something that she was very good at. The empathy has served her well in this role for sure. This week, Marni talked a lot about her development. Next week, we'll talk a little bit more about developing others. We'll see you then.
Farewell, listeners. Tune in next time as the journey continues. I'm John White at VJourneyman, for Nick Cordy at NetworkNerd_, signing off.
Adios.